Now that Wizards of the Coast is faced by an insane backlash online and in national news from D&D fans who despise their planned updates to the Open Gaming License, or OGL, they've changed their tactics. Instead of trying to go behind the D&D community's back to force a change they knew that we'd all hate, they are now opening wide their arms in an invitation to have a conversation about the OGL changes. But here's the thing. The draft OGL version 1.2 that they've released and the Creative Commons license that they are proposing are both shams and a ploy to further their greedy corporate plans at the expense of the D&D community. Today, we are going to dig into two of Wizards of the Coast's new schemes to have their way with us and to go over some of the worst parts, as I see it, of the draft OGL version 1.2 and this joke of a Creative Commons license. Okay, the first new scheme or strategy or tactic being employed by Wizards of the Coast is that of damage control. Essentially, they are trying to put out the fire that is going on all over social media, the internet, and on national television right now with this fiasco, this debacle of an OGL update. To sum it all up, they want to silence us. They want to take this debate, this outrage, away from the public forum, and they want to move it into a more private forum where they can better control and quiet down the conversation. And this is in essence what they are doing with this playtest, as they're calling it, of the OGL version 1.2. They want to put out the OGL, let us offer our feedback on their forums, on their site, where they can essentially quiet down this entire conversation and take it out of the public spotlight and hopefully help put out this PR nightmare that they're currently going through. Their other tactic to help control the damage that is being caused is that they now have a new public face for this OGL update, that of Kyle Brink. And it is written in a human voice intended to strip away the mechanical corporate feel of the communications that we've had up until this point and humanize Wizards of the Coast as well. And their goal here is to make us more likely to believe that they are being transparent and genuinely trying to work with us and do right by us. And when their new OGL came out, the version 1.2 draft, and my team and I read the announcement and we began to look at the draft, we were somewhat hopeful that direction was changing. But as we began to dig into it, it was clear that they were still up to their old tricks. The other scheme that they're currently using as well to help influence outcomes in a direction that they like is that of anchoring. Basically, when OGL version 1.1 was leaked, it was so bad, it was so atrocious, everyone hated it, and nobody was even going to consider signing and using that thing. And so now what they're doing is they're backing off from that very strong, very bad position, and they're giving us something that, by comparison, isn't that bad. This is a psychological negotiation trick known as anchoring. The essence of this is to present you with something very, very bad, such as being shot in the head, and then because that's so bad, when you're presented with something that's still bad but not quite as bad, such as getting shot in the leg, you're more likely to be okay with that not quite so bad thing. Because the fact of the matter is that OGL version 1.2, the draft that they put out there for us to review, is still really bad. Now, I'm going to talk about the parts that I see as the worst, but if you want an in-depth breakdown, I recommend you watch a video the Rules lawyer did titled Lawyer Analyzes OGL 1.2, which I'll link down below. The very first thing that jumps out to me in version 1.2 is that they still want to deauthorize version 1.0a. They're still attempting to go that route, which is in bad faith and illegal according to almost every legal expert that I've heard from. And as I mentioned in a previous video that I did on this topic, their ploy is to get us to sign the new OGL and voluntarily give up our rights to use version 1.0a. Next, there are still parts of OGL version 1.2 that Wizards of the Coast can update if they desire to do so. And the question that immediately comes to my mind is, well, what precludes them from making updates to those particular sections that we don't agree with? Trust in them? Trust that they're going to do the right thing? Trust that they're not going to screw us over? I think they've eroded all of our trust at this point, and I just don't want anything to be able to be changed at their discretion. Next, they have a severability clause in OGL version 1.2 that is not standard at all for severability clauses. What's normal is that if there is a certain part of a license that cannot be enforced, that part of the license might be discarded. But instead, what they have in version 1.2 is that if there's one part of that entire big license that can't be enforced, that's deemed illegal or whatever, they can throw the whole thing out. Next, the VTT policy that they announced is clearly and overtly and cannot be mistaken otherwise as an attempt to force other VTTs out as competitors to D&D Beyond or their new virtual tabletop, which might actually be on a platform different than D&D Beyond. They simply want to stifle all competition so that they can have a monopoly on their new virtual tabletop. Okay, and now we're on to the part that I probably hate the most, or close to the top of my list of being the worst part of this provision as far as I can see, and that is the policy in there on hateful conduct or content. Basically, they could terminate the license of anyone who creates or engages in harmful, discriminatory, legal, obscene, or harassing conduct. And here's the thing, Wizards of the Coast, per this new license update that they're showing us, will be the sole determiner of what is classified or counts as that hateful, discriminatory, etc. conduct. And furthermore, we cannot contest it via suit or other legal action. And the big question here, besides giving up our legal rights to talk about that if they come up and say we did something wrong, is do we really trust Wizards of the Coast at this point as the morality police, considering their recent behavior? Should a company who has recently done quite a few things that are unethical, immoral, and just plain wrong be trusted to enforce morality for other people? The next big point here is that it's not just the content that you would publish under this license, but it's also your conduct. What if Wizards of the Coast doesn't like what I have to say on Twitter or YouTube? They could just decide that it's harmful and I couldn't contest it. This can be used to basically keep people in line and limit our right of free speech. Okay, next let's talk about this Creative Commons license that they're going to be putting out there. Basically, the idea of this is that they are going to be taking parts of the SRD 5.1, which was published along with OGL version 1.0a originally, and they're going to put it as a Creative Commons license that people can use however they want. However, the thing is that it's only parts of the SRD 5.1, very, very specific parts. For instance, it specifies pages 56 through 104. However, if you look at those are actually game mechanics that they can't copyright anyway. And they don't include the spells or magic items, which you're gonna have to sign up with their new OGL if you want to use them. And then it specifies pages 254 to 260, which are monster game mechanics at a very high level, but not the monsters themselves. Again, we have game mechanics that you can't copyright anyway. Well, then we go to pages of 358 to 359, which are conditions, also game mechanics not copyrightable. So everything that they are magnanimously putting in the Creative Commons license are game mechanics that they couldn't restrict us from using anyway. So this is basically designed to appear like they are doing a great and wonderful thing, but in reality, it's meaningless. Anything relevant is still locked up in the new OGL that they are pushing forward with. So while at first glance, their announcement in the new OGL version 1.2 might appear to be steps in the right direction, and it kind of is, maybe, it's really just a whole big nothing burger in my opinion. The latest OGL version 1.2 draft, when you dig into it and really start looking at things, is a non-starter. It still doesn't work at all. The only acceptable path that will satisfy me is that they drop this business of deauthorizing version 1.0a of the OGL. And until they do that, I urge that the D&D community continues to cancel our D&D Beyond subscriptions and instead support other content creators that we believe in and that we think are doing good, moral, and ethical things for our community. I urge you to let your voice be heard in the only way that Wizards of the Coast executives will listen: their wallets and their bottom line. And remember, if you want a more in-depth breakdown of OGL version 1.2, watch this video right here on screen by my friend the Rules Lawyer, or linked down below.